As a whip maker, I'm always trying to make my next whip better than the previous one. I'm always trying to find better ways of binding the bellies, better ways to make the whip look better, and overall to make the whip last longer. And it's difficult to make a video on how I make a bullwhip because I'm always changing the ways and changing the materials that I use to make the whip. But as of this day, this is what I have found to be the most effective way to make a bullwhip. I've changed a lot of things since day one, but there's also a few things that I do the same, and there's also a lot of materials that I'm still using to this day. So this is a video that I put together for you guys, describing my methods, showing you the materials that I'm using to make a bullwhip as of today. Hope you find it informative. Enjoy. Step 1. Prepping the handle. Although I've experimented with many different materials and I'm always trying to find a better or stronger way to make whips, I have not changed handle material. From day one I started using 1/4-inch steel rod, and to this day I use 1/4-inch steel rod for all of my whips. The whip that I'm going to be building in this video is a 6-foot 16-plat bullwhip with a 10-inch handle. If you measure this out though, this is actually 11 inches long, and that's because when I tie on the bellies, I like to tie a knot in the middle of the strands to find the center of the strand to make things easier and more efficient. And in the end, the additional inch will be cut off, making the handle 10 inches long. So that hasn't changed at all. What has changed perhaps is my grinding method here used on the handle. I just grind it down to a nice dome here, and that's so the metal, the sharp metal doesn't cut into the core material, ultimately causing separation of the handle and the BB loaded portion of the core later on when it's too late. So this is what I use to this day. Never changed this material, still using it, 1/4-inch steel rod. Now the material that I use for the core, however, has changed. That's a different story. What I'm using today on all of my nylon whips is 3/8 inch sinker cord, and this stuff is fantastic. And the reason that I switched to this, there's a couple reasons. One, it's much easier and quicker to get the BBs inside of this material. Secondly, the company that I used to make cores with discontinued their product, which is very unfortunate, but ultimately it's better because this is a better material. It's stronger. The side walls are woven much finer, so the chance of BBs sneaking out the side when you're attaching it to the handle is much less likely to occur. And this material can be found on this website right here. Check them out. I believe the price is 10 cents per foot. Now you may be wondering why I don't just use 1/4-inch sinker cord. And at the beginning I thought, why not? You know, I tried it actually, and for some reason 1/4-inch cord does not fit on the 1/4-inch steel rod. So it turns out when you fill the 3/8 inch cord with the BBs, it stretches a little bit, and there's tension that's put on this cord, and it turns out to be 1/4 inch, and it works very well. Make sure you get 3/8 inch. I experimented with different sizes and found 3/8 inch cord to work the best, so that is what I'm using to this day for my nylon whip cores. And also this stuff comes just like that. You don't have to, it doesn't come with a inner strands that you have to pull out like the other material did, so that's one less step to take. Also, another thing that has not changed is the size of the BBs that I use to fill the core with. These are .177 caliber BBs, or 4.3 millimeter as well. Same thing. And I have a new way of getting the BBs inside the core that is very efficient. So what you're going to want to do next is take your steel rod and the end that I've ground down, I want to fit that like that, and I want to slide it up about 2.5 inches. And then I want this handle plus the core material to equal about 6 feet 1 inch, because remember, we have that additional inch on the handle where all of the knots are going to be. We're just going to cut that off and make it nice and neat. So wouldn't be a bad idea to actually make it 6'2", because when you do fill this core with the BBs, there is a little bit of shrinkage, so give yourself an extra inch to work with. So get this measured out, have it equal 6 feet 2 inches is what I like to do these days. So now it's time to fill the core with BBs. We're going to fill 1 foot with the BBs. Now keep in mind, you want a solid foot of BBs, so this part is not counted for. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So it's time to fill the core with the BBs. There was a period of time where I was actually experimenting it, and I was using just 550 paracord for the cores on my whips, and I would have to grind down the tips of my handles to accommodate for the smaller diameter cord, 550 cord. But nowadays, to get the BBs inside the sinker cord, I have this. This is brass tubing that I got at a hardware store. And I'll give you the exact measurements. I'll give you the diameter. It looks to be about 5.6, 5.7 millimeters. I honestly didn't even measure this when I bought it. I just brought in some BBs along with the cord and fit in the core. Great. It accepts BBs inside. Great. So I bought it. So it's actually until just now that I'm measuring it, and it looks to be about 5.6 millimeters. And also on the other side here, I just made a little funnel here to pour the BBs into. You can imagine it'd be very time consuming and counterintuitive, I guess you could say, to just put 1 BB at a time inside this brass rod. So now this funnel, I pour the BBs in and it guides it right down. I've also marked 1 foot. You can't see it probably on the camera, but 1 foot has been marked here. So that way I just insert this into the core, into the sinker cord, that is, like this. There we go. And here is the 1 inch mark. Oh, sorry, here's the 1 foot mark. And remember, we're going up the handle 2 inches, so I push it on an additional 2 inches to accommodate for that part on the handle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this off with artificial sinew to keep the BBs from going all the way down to the end. It's a stopper. So I'll just use some artificial sinew for that. So here's some binding on the core to stop the BBs and to end the BB portion here. I just bound that real tightly with the artificial sinew. So now we can put the BBs in. So I just have it all in a vise here, and then I'm going to pour the BBs in the top here. One thing I might suggest that I actually didn't do, I probably should before I start filling it, is put it in the clamp over the core material. Otherwise this is liable to slip right off and all the BBs will fall on the floor and the world will end. Alrighty. It's a lot quicker than feeding them in one by one. I'll say one more little group of BBs, and that should be enough. If they don't go in, jiggle this a little bit. Alright? So, let's see how we did. I'm going to take it out of the clamp here. Ooh, that was close. And then you're just going to slowly pull this brass rod out, and then you can just run your fingers here and feel that make sure the BBs are in a nice line end to end. Sometimes if you are rushing a little bit, I guess, and there's some slack on the cord, the BBs will be lopsided and be side by side, but you want them just to be nice and straight. So just feel it with your finger. We have some bulging going on here. We just need to pinch it a little bit and they'll line right back up. So up we go. Okay, perfect. So here is the end of the BBs, because remember, this inch we're not going to fill because this is the inch that's going over the steel rod. Okay. So now we can fit this over our handle, onto the handle. So we're going to take our handle and just slip it right on. Like that. And pull it nice and tight. And once again, make sure the BBs start immediately after the steel. You want that last BB to be touching with a fair amount of pressure up against the steel. Run your fingers down, make sure they're all in a line. And now we're going to attach this sinker cord to the metal handle. And we're going to use hockey tape for that. Works great. It's very strong. Kind of smells like fish. I have no idea why. So now what we're going to do is take some hockey tape, and I'm going to fasten this sinker cord very firmly to my steel handle here. We're actually going to go all the way down the BB portion of the core to keep the BBs in line. And we want to tie this very tightly. This is just holding the BBs end to end tightly. So I've wrapped the BB portion only and about an inch beyond with the hockey tape, so that's nice and secure. Also, I'm going to wrap the whole handle to give the parachute cord something to adhere to. Next, I'm going to cut about a 2-inch piece of floor mat material. This can be found at floormats.com. This is just going to build up the transition area a little bit. Take this just like this, just a couple of inches, and fold it just like that. And as I mentioned previously in another video, this stuff actually sticks on itself. It's very convenient. Next, I'm going to go over that a couple times with some artificial sinew and a crisscross pattern, spiral. Just like this. And once more. What this is doing is it's giving us a foundational stiffness to the core of the whip. And the idea is, if we can start off with a nice, solid, strong transition, On the core, well, we've got 3 more layers to go, not counting the binding, so this will be a very tight, springy whip. And that's what we're going for. And guess what? The artificial sinew is waxed, so it sticks on itself as well. So all we have to do is cut it. And there is the first part of the transition. Now I'm going to roll this. So I just gave the whole layer a nice roll. And now we can start our first belly of this whip. For my bellies and overlay, I'm still using 550 parachute cord. Here's the strand length measurements that I'll be using in this whip. You might like to copy this down. It's also in the description for you. We'll start with the 2 11-foot pieces, followed by the 8.5-foot piece, and lastly the 6.5-foot piece. So I'm going to cut those out and start attaching the belly. Okay, I've measured out and cut my 4 strands for the first belly, and I've tied them on here at the top. And what I'll do next is just plait this 8-plat pattern herringbone under 2/2, drop strands as I go as needed, and we'll continue this all the way down until we only have 4 strands left, and we'll tie off the belly. So I'm plaiting down the handle, getting ready to come up to the transition point, which is crucial that we plait very tightly here, because this is the transition area of the whip, and this is the focus of where all of your springiness is going to come from. So make sure you're plaiting nice and tight over the transition. I have changed my method for dropping strands on bellies, and the way I do it nowadays is can't do any more with this strand here, so I'm going to keep on plaiting, pretend it's not even there. So now we're going to go under 2/1 like this, keep plaiting, pretend that's not there. I'm just going to use the one under it, still going under 2/2 on the right side for the time being, under 2/1 on the left, and carry that out for a couple more. You'll see this strand is being abandoned. See that? Keep going. And now, what will happen to this strand? This is its final resting place. Gonna give it one last tug. If you want, I like to use pliers for this. Give it one last tug. I'm gonna clip it off. Leave 1 millimeter. And I'm gonna take the lighter and melt the end. And you can take your finger and do this, or I would suggest using something aside from your finger, and that just lays down nice and smooth. See that? It doesn't matter, looks don't matter. This is just a belly that'll be covered up by another belly. Now for the overlay, I use the conventional way of dropping strands, which is pulling the strand around the bottom like that. So that's how I drop strands on bellies now. Makes for a smoother taper, and it's quicker and easier. Okay, so I've come to the end of this first belly here, and I've got about 3.5 inches on all the strands. So at this point, I'll take it and I'll just give it one last tug here, and I'll show you how I make a nice seamless transition from the first belly to the rest of the core. First of all, I'll take these strands and just wrap them around the back. I'm just trying to make sure it's all even, make sure there's no sudden drop-offs. I'll take some artificial sinew and I'll start it up here. Now, as I'm wrapping, I'm not pulling extremely tight. I'm just pulling firmly, but I'm not pulling it tight. I'm almost letting the weight of the spool wrap it and determine how tight it is. So I'm just continuing to wrap these strands. I'm going to take my first strand, the shortest strand. I'm just going to snip it crossways here at an angle to encourage tapering. I'm going to set this aside here in my clamp. Next one's going to be about an inch down. Same slant there. Next one. And the final one. So when we put these together, see, we have a nice taper. And believe it or not, cutting these at an angle really does make a big difference. I know it doesn't seem like it would, but it does. So we can continue with this. And I should give you guys a reason why not to pull very tightly here. If you pull and bind this area very tightly, you're going to see it in the final product of your whip. When you roll your whip out, this part will kind of fall. It won't roll, it'll just kind of flop out. That's because it's stiff here. It's not as important to wrap loosely on the first belly. It's more so the second belly. That's where it can really be noticeable if you wrapped it too tight. Make sure I'm still in the frame. Good. Okay. Now, once I reach the end of this last strand here, I'm going to continue, because I'm going to show you what happens if we just stop there. What do you think is going to happen on your whip? There's going to be a crease here. So to prevent that from happening, we're going to carry on the binding a couple more inches beyond the end of this belly. Oops. And then when we've carried it on a couple of inches, we're going to turn right back around and go back up to the starting point. And I'm still not pulling tight. Might even be wrapping it even more loosely than when I descended down. That was a oxymoron. Redundant. All the way back up to the top. And to secure this artificial sinew, I'm just going to tie a half hitch. I'll tie two of them. And there we go. Look at how long, notice how long that transition is. This is something else that's changed over time in my whip making. I've made these transitions almost a foot long, and that gives it time, that gives it space. If you, in my first tutorial on how to make whips, my transition was only about that long, and that didn't allow for the maximum taper. So there you go. Now it's time to bind the transition of this first belly. But first, before we do that, I'm going to give this whole thing a roll over there on the floor. You can use a piece of wood or whatever to roll it, 2x4 or whatever. Just roll it. You guys have seen how I do that in my videos. So I just rolled the belly. Everything's nice and smooth. And now, before I move on to binding the transition, I'm going to give the end here a few wraps of artificial sinew, and this will firm, just kind of secure things, make everything nice and tight. And I'm going to do this on every belly, so once we are ready to tie on the foundation for the knot, we'll have a nice firm foundation to drive the nails into, so it won't be going anywhere. This is something that you do want to pull pretty tight on. Tie a knot, wrap the excess around. That just helps tighten things up. So now we can move on to binding the belly. For this, I'm pretty much doing the exact same thing that I did for the core, except the binding is going to be a little more extensive and a little tighter, as well as the piece of floor mat, double stick tape, mesh tape, to be a little longer, around about 5 to 6 inches. I'm just going to measure how wide we need the strand, or I need this to be by folding it around, and where this tip touches. That's where I'm going to hold that with my fingernail. That's how wide it needs to be. So I'm going to cut about a 6-inch strip of this material. And we're going to use this to bind the first belly. It's hard to peel. So find where the exact transition is. It's right here. And we want the mesh to go an inch above it. Fold it. So there we go. We're going to start wrapping this with the artificial sinew. There we go. And there's a new material that I've been using. It's called Dacron polyester. I'll show that to you in a minute. It's very strong. So if we've reached the end of this mesh tape, we're going to go beyond. We're going to end it about here, the binding. And the reason we're extending it beyond the end of this is the same reason we extended it past the first belly, to where the first belly ended, so we don't have any creasing and a weak point in the whip. I think that's sufficient. That's about 5 more inches beyond. We're going to go back up. Like I said, I'm pulling a little tighter on this, that's for sure, especially on the transition area. You can go ahead and pull pretty tight. So I've ran the binding up and down a few times. You can tell it's starting to be nice and stiff at the transition. Now I'm done with this for the time being, and I'm going to actually set the spool. I'm not going to cut it just yet. It's still attached. I'm going to set it right up here. And at this point I'm going to introduce you guys a new material. And this is called Dacron, also known as polyester. This is from a company called Western Filament. And the width of the material that I'm using to bind is 2 millimeters. This stuff is unbelievably strong. For a while I was using the guts of the parachute cord, the inner strands, and I was finding that I was breaking them. I was pulling them with such force as to, tighten the transition on some of the whips that I wanted to have very stiff transitions, and it just couldn't hold up to it. But this stuff, I do not know the poundage. I do know that it is stronger than the artificial sinew, and it is polyester, Dacron material, unbelievably strong. So I'm gonna actually take some of this now and give it a layer of that. I'm gonna start it. The reason that I didn't cut this yet is because we're gonna tie off once we go down and come back up with the binding with this Dacron. I'm gonna actually use the strand, the spool of artificial sinew to tie off the Dacron. Now I'm pulling very tightly. I'm going to actually do the cross pattern here. Probably pulling this right now at about 45 to 50 pounds. This is what my guess would be. Now as I move down the whip past the transition area, I can start letting up a little bit. But not too much, because keep in mind, well, I didn't tell you this yet, but this Dacron is not waxed. It will not stick on itself. So if you're kind of skimping on tension, it will unravel. And also if you drop the spool, unlike artificial sinew, it'll unravel on you. So that can be time consuming if you unfortunately drop the whole spool, which I've done many times. I can't believe I haven't done it in this video. And I'm carrying on this binding even past the artificial sinew, going for a tapered rigidity, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos. Now we're going back up to where we started. Once again, pulling tighter as I reach the transition. Ouch. So we reach the top again, but I'm going to dip down one more time. Just to get that transition one more time. Then I'm going to roll it again. Don't worry, we have one more layer before the overlay, so don't worry about getting it, completely 100% tight here, right here. Back up, and then we're going to tie it off. So I'm going to hold this here, take the artificial sinew, and close it off just like that. And this artificial sinew, the reason we didn't cut it is so that we can do this and tie it off. Cut them both. Just press it against the wrapping. And now take a close look at this. Nice and stiff. And that's just the first belly. So I'm going to go give this a roll and we can start the second belly. So the first belly's done. I want to take a quick minute to show you guys that this whip is already showing signs of a very nice rollout. A nice loop forming there at the transition. And this is just the first belly. One of the benefits of using this 2mm Dacron tape from Western Filament. It's a little bit expensive. I believe it's about $30 a roll. I actually found this roll on eBay. A guy was getting rid of it for about $12. Look into it. It's fantastic stuff. Alright, on to the second belly. Working on the second belly of this whip and beginning the plating pattern under 3/2. It's a 10 plat. And we'll continue that all the way down, dropping strands as I go, making sure that I plate extra tight at the transition and then ending the belly just like I ended that belly. Okay, the second belly of this whip is complete. The methods I used for this second belly are identical to the first belly. The only difference is the floor mat tape, instead of extending here, it extends a few more inches down. And here's the end of the belly. Same method used. Make sure I'm getting the nice taper. And there you go. Once again, I hit it with some of the Dacron here to strengthen the transition. Now I'm going to roll this and we'll be ready to start the overlay. So I've begun the 16 plat overlay, and my favorite pattern to do on a 16 plat nylon whip for the handle is grab 2, under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. It's basically an 8 plat but with 16. It's kind of like you're working with only 8 strands because you're grabbing 2 at a time. Once again, the sequence is under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. And what I mean by that is grabbing 2 strands side by side and weaving them as one, plating them as one. So I'll plate this handle about an inch before the steel rod ends, switch over to a herringbone, and carry out the herringbone to the end of the whip. Okay, so I'm working my way down the whip. Transitioned from a diamond plat to a herringbone here. 16 plat goes under 4 over 4. Now this is a very handy tool that I'm using these days called a hemostat. It's just a clamp. All you do is you clamp it on there when you want to take a break, and it holds your position for you so the strands don't unravel. Moving on. My method for dropping strands has not really changed at all. The only thing that I do differently now than possibly from my original how to make a bullwhip tutorial is, instead of just dropping the strand now, I let some strands build up over it before I take it, because there's more pressure from multiple strands pushing down on the strand that I'm dropping. So if I just do it now, drop it now, it's more likely to just cause a gap. So what I like to do when I drop strands is I'll plate a few more over the strand that I'm dropping. So the strand I'm dropping is all the way up. Oh, sorry. Plate a few more over that. Yeah, see that? Now the strand that I'm dropping is actually the third one up. This little short strand here. So I pull everything once again, tighten everything like this, and prepare for the drop like this. Pull everything nice, one last tight pull, and I'll take this, one pull with the thumb, and then I'll take it, lift these two, and drop it down under here. Pull these strands, hold these with the forefinger and the thumb, and pull it over ever so carefully and get it right in the middle. And just keep plating. And now it's 7 strands under 4 over 3. And immediately after, I pull the strand right below the strand that I dropped to get it nice, and it's as if it was never there. That's how I drop strands now. About done with the overlay of this whip. As you can see, I have about a 1/2 inch exposed here at the very end. So now it's time to make a fall, and I'm using 550 parachute cord, and to lace the cord inside of itself, I have here a Permalock needle that I've just threaded in one end, melted the end of the parachute cord, threaded it into this needle, Permalock lacing needle that you can get at tandyleather.com, and I'm just threading it into itself. As you can see here, this is something that I've been doing for years now. Okay, we have a fall here, and I'm going to open this eye up on the fall like that and slip all 4 strands like this, and the fall goes up here for now. I'm going to tighten it by pulling it. Now it's secure. So you can see we're just going to swing it back here. Now it's time to tie the fall in place. We're going to start here with our top left strand. We're going to go around the back, including the fall, like this around the back, and through here. Just like that. Pulling it around the back like this. Don't pull it super tight yet. I like to mark each strand as I go by tying a knot. In this case I can't because it's too short, but I'll remember which one I've already done. Next we'll take this strand here, whatever is more convenient, whatever is closest to this strand above here. So we're going to take this and do the same thing through this loop, and you want it to form right there is where we want that to be. Once again, pulling on the back like that. This one is long enough that I can tie a knot in it, and this will just remind me that I already tied this one. Next, around the back, forming that loop right there, through the loop, around the back, pull it snug, tie a knot to mark it. And our last one that we have here, same thing. And this one, I am going to pull this one very tight, as tight as I can get it. Okay. So here's the last one we did. I'm going to take my needle and a lighter, if I can reach it here. And this is the last strand that I just pulled. Gonna melt the end here to a tip so I can thread it inside my needle again. Like this. And now we're going to take it, and we're going to skip the knot that corresponds to the strand here. And I'm going to go under all these half hitch knots here, and I'm going under the fall as well. The top one here is the fall. Going under that one too. I'm going to pull that pretty tight. Not so tight to where this knot gets sucked up under all the other knots, because remember, they're not snug yet, so it's very easy to accidentally pull this through. That seems like it's good. Pretty tight. And now we're going to snip this. I got all my tools on the opposite side of the camera. Sorry about that. And I'm going to cut it here. And then I'm going to melt the end so it doesn't fray when it's nearing the speed of sound. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these, try to get it in order and snug them all. I like to actually, I like to use pliers for this. So I will. Here's the first one, you can see it tightening there. Here's the second one tightening. And here's the third one. And as you can see, this slipped a little bit. See how it slipped down there? Pull it back out. Lastly, I'm going to make sure that I have that strand that we laced through all these fall hitches. I'm going to grab it with the pliers, and then I can slowly pull my fall into place there. And don't yank on this more than you need to, because this is crack over crack over crack. This is going to get set into place. And the last step, one of the last steps, is to snip these strands here. Do not accidentally cut your fall. I've done that many times and still somehow manage to do it every now and then by accident. I'm going to melt the ends of these strands so they don't fray. So what I'll do is I'll just melt this end here, and then just press it into the half hitch there. Give this a pull, make sure that's not going anywhere, and it isn't. And here is the complete overlay with the fall attached to the whip. Now this is what a whip looks like before you roll it. You can see how much rolling does to a whip. So I'm going to roll this, and then I'm going to get started on the knot foundations. So we've got our end of our handle in the clamp here, and if you remember, we measured out 11 inches for a handle instead of 10. And here you'll see why. We're going to cut all this off because it kind of tapers here and it's not even, so when we put our foundation on here, we want to cut this slanted part off so it's perfectly flat. And we won't be forfeiting an inch either because we made it 11 in the first place. First off, I'm going to take some artificial sinew and tie this off so that when we cut the end of the handle off, it's not going to be unraveling. Now we can begin to cut the strands away from here. One thing I forgot to do, to further encourage the strands from not unraveling, I'm going to take some of that hockey tape and go over the artificial sinew just once, one wrap. As you can see, the overlay is gone. Now we're at the second belly. Second belly's peeling off. There's the first belly. So we're cutting through every belly. You can see the history of the progress of making your whip, like rings of a tree. Here you loved making whips. Here you hate it. No, I'm just kidding. Now the problem with doing this with a razor blade is that very, very quickly your blade will become worthless because you're actually basically wearing it down on the steel rod. So at this point, I like to take my pliers and just pull this off. And there is our steel rod that I want to cut off. As soon as I clean this up just a little bit, and now I'm going to grab, this is what I use to cut the steel rod, is just a hacksaw with a metal cutting blade. And we're almost through, and I think I can just rock it back and forth with a pair of pliers. And there's the tip. Once again, I'm going to neaten things up with a combination of my lighter and these snippers. We want this end to be flat, not an angle. We want it to be perfectly flat, perpendicular with the sides of the whip. You can see little sparks there, the steel igniting. Pretty good. Now it's time to prep the leather for our foundation. As of this day, this is the leather that I'm using for my knot foundations on all my whips. This is most likely chrome tanned cowhide or chemically tanned cowhide, other than vegetable tan. And it's about 2.6 millimeters thick. And all I do is I take this is actually a paint stick that I've cut, and every whip that I would make from a certain point I would, just cut it by hand fine-tuned it for every whip that I made until finally this is the exact measurement of what I need as far as the size of the piece of leather that's used for the foundation. I took a paint stick and I cut it. I'll give you the measurements of this. So this is 3 3/8 long by 1 inch, and that just so happens to be what I need to go over a bullwhip with 2 nylon bellies, 1/4 inch steel rod handle, and then the 16 plat overlay. This fits it perfectly. So what I'll do is I'll just take this little stencil or guide, put it on here, and just kind of trace around it so I know where to cut. And I put this little lanyard thing on here just so I wouldn't lose it. So I love to lose things. There you go, and I'm just going to cut this out with a pair of leather shears or scissors. So here's what I cut out, and if anything it's going to be excessively long, but it's better to have it longer than shorter, because when I go to fit it on the handle we can just trim it. So let's go size it up on the handle. And that is a perfect fit right there. This next step is optional. I do it in all of my whips now. What I'm going to do is measure the width of a piece of parachute cord like this. And find it to be about 3.8 millimeters. Then I'm going to take that amount off on part of this. I'm going to take that off the width. And the reason I'm doing this is because I like to add this little spiral disc of parachute cord on the tops of my knots and have the tops of the knots exposed. So what I'm doing is I cut off a equivalent piece of leather to the size of the parachute cord, and then I'm going to spiral it on top of the foundation and then tie the knot over that. And it's kind of cool. It makes it more interesting, I think. I didn't come up with this idea. I don't know who did. It was another nylon whip maker. So credit to whoever they are. I don't know who did it. So now we're going to attach our knot foundation to our handle here. And this hockey tape is just temporarily holding things in place for us. This is not going to take all the force by any means. So we get it nice and wrapped around there, making sure that the bottom is flush. If I were to take a piece of, flat anything, something that's flat, I would want the handle, and I would want all the way around this piece of leather to be flush with something flat. And that looks great. I'm going to take a spool of some of my favorite material, artificial sinew, and I'm going to bind this on. Still pretty standard to what I've been doing in all of my other videos. This hasn't changed a whole lot, other than the spiral parachute cord discs that we're going to attach. Now this needs to be tight, okay? I've been having some problems with my hands, so this is a little painful to do this. There's a whole video coming up on that. Alright, so now we have this bound very tightly, but you know me, I like to go even further and drive nails into the foundation. So I'm still using bright wire brads. These are the short 1/2 inch ones. And there's a new method that I use to get these things in. Just gonna set some here. First off, I'll take one, and I just do rows of 3. 1, 2, and 3. And a lot of reasons that I've changed doing things so drastically in the past few months is to try to preserve my hands. And I'll show you. I used to just grab a pair of pliers and grab this thing with my hand and just jam these nails in with all the stress on my finger. And I can't get away with doing that anymore. It's very stupid of me to do that for so many whips. I'm going to take this C-clamp here that's adjustable and just squeeze it. That's it. And there it goes. Without tearing my hands up, the nails are going in just as they would if I were to use the pliers. So you got to be smart about how you're doing these things. I'm not going to go through all the rows with you guys. I'm going to do 1 row on top, 1 on the bottom, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. 3 rows. So that's 12 nails total, and I think that'll be sufficient. And we'll move on to installing the spiral disc. I think you guys will like that. Okay, cue the tape haters. I'm going to take some hockey tape, and I'm going to go over all of the potentially exposed nail heads. Just once. This is not doing anything as far as reinforcement goes. This is merely covering the heads of the nails so they don't, over time, cut into our knot. So there we go. Give it a pull. Give it 2 pulls. Give it 3 pulls. I'm lifting my whole workbench right now with this, so it's not going anywhere. Alright. Now it's time to prep our parachute cord disc. I've got some black 550 parachute cord here. Before I do what I'm about to do next, I'm going to snip. This is ungutted parachute cord. I'm going to snip this cleanly here so that the inner cords are flush with the outer cord. And I'm going to take, have a pliers on hand. These needle nose work pretty well for what I'm about to do. If I can get the excess, there we go. These work great. Have them on hand and ready to go because you're going to need to switch over very quickly. I'm going to melt the tip here. Actually get this nice and liquefied while it's still burning. Blow it out, grab my pliers. And this will start our spiral. See what I did there? Now we should be able to pull the pliers out. And then it just sticks on itself like this. And this is the beginning of our roll here. So I'm going to let this sit for a minute, and I'm going to plug in my hot glue gun. Our hot glue gun is warming up. I'm going to take this. If you're left-handed, you might be doing it opposite, but I'm going to take this and just start rolling it like this. See that? Just rolling it up. And every so often I'm comparing it to our foundation just to see and make sure that we're not overshooting it, because we want the diameter to be, we want it to be exactly the same as our foundation. Now I know what you guys are thinking about the hot glue. That won't last forever. No, it won't. Actually, it'll probably only last till we wax the whip, then it will melt. But this is just holding it down temporary. The knot is going to be tied over the edges of this thing to hold it in place. That'll do it. Let's see if our hot glue gun is hot yet. Yep. sides, in the middle. And I'm just going to take this spiral, press it straight down, palm of my hand, like that. See that? I'm going to take a little pair of snippers and cut this at an angle. Got this Siamese animal here. It's getting in my way. And I'm going to snip this at an angle here. Come back with my lighter and just melt that like this. And press it into itself like this. So there's the spiral. It's really a kind of a cool touch. Like I said, I didn't come up with this. Someone else did. See that? Isn't that cool? And the knot will cover up about this much. So instead of just being, you know, flat, whether you like to plasti dip your foundations or just leave them, you know, seeing the layers of your whip, this just neatens things up. And I personally like knots that are not closed at the top. Gives it more character. So we're ready to tie the knot over this. I'm not going to do that in this video because I have another video on how to tie a 7x6 Turk's head knot so that the center is exposed. So please refer to that video. I'll put it in the description for you. So that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and tie this knot now. I am going to do it now, but I'm going to do the knot now. You know what I'm saying? I personally like to go over the hockey tape one more time with a few wraps of the artificial sinew just to give the knot something to grip to. See that? That's a telemarketer calling. I'm not going to answer it. Alright. This comes up here, and we're ready to tie the knot now. Here's how I do the transition area nowadays. I have this is a spare piece of kangaroo hide. You don't have to use kangaroo hide, but you could even build it up with this artificial sinew if you wanted to. But having a little piece of leather here just kind of makes this area just stand up a little bit better, I think. I like to do it. This is always a little bit tricky to do. If you wanted to, you could cut a piece of tape lengthwise, just cut the width in about half, and that can hold it in place for you while you wrap it with the artificial sinew. You can make this pretty tight. I don't put any. I used to put anchor nails at the transition like I did in the at the heel, but it's just unnecessary and it takes up time. You don't need to do it. You could do it though. Wouldn't hurt. I would just do like 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's not going anywhere. And when we wax it, the temperatures tend to tighten everything anyway, so that's just going to get a little tighter. So here we go. We got our two foundations. Here and here. I'm going to tie these two knots. I already have video tutorials on how to do those, so please refer to those. They're in the description. So here we go, tying the knots. So the heel knot's tied here, 7x6 Turk's head 2-pass. And there's the spiral there in the middle. Just kind of gives it a cool little look to it. Now the way I cut these strands nowadays is I'll take a pair of snippers and I'll get it pretty much as close as I can. I'll just take this and snip it here. And then I'll give this one last tug here. And then I'll snip that as well. And I go over this. I have a wood burner, or even a soldering iron that you don't care about anymore. That'll work. You can get these on eBay for like less than $10 new. Plug this thing in, and I'll just take it. Once again, this is not my idea. I'll touch the ends here and melt them. That way, when you don't take a crude lighter and melt like a 1-inch diameter around everything else. It's very isolated. Just touch it. So I'm gonna do that real quick. Now it might be necessary to lift that cut strand up so you don't melt into your overlay. There we go. And the same thing. Man, it smells like popcorn. Exactly like popcorn. That's funny. This parachute cord puts off a different smell when you just melt it with a hot piece of metal. It's different than just melting with a flame for some crazy reason. I have no idea. There you go. That's it. A little bit dripped there. Now we're gonna roll this here. Yeah, sounds good. So here are the two completed Turk's head knots. Here's the heel knot, and here's the transition knot. If you want to learn how to tie this heel knot, click the link right here. And if you need to learn how to tie and install this transition knot, click the link right here. And here's a close-up view of that spiral pattern that I'm doing nowadays. Just makes it a unique little something interesting to look at. Last step would be to wax this whip and then attach a cracker, and then it's done. Here's what I'm using nowadays to wax my nylon whips. Nesco 18 Roast Master. Fill the bottom up with water and wax goes in there. And to get the readings, the temperature of the wax, I use this infrared thermometer here. It's very accurate. Okay, well, nowadays when I wax a whip, I like to wax it at around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Got some paper towels here that I'm going to be using to dab the extra wax off of the whip. So I'm getting about 206 degrees here. Remember that the wax on the surface is always going to be cooler than the wax underneath, so make sure that before you get a temperature reading, stir up the wax. 208 degrees, that's not too hot. I take the whip here, I just fold it, roll it up, and into the wax it goes, fully submerged. It's going to be bubbling a lot. So I like to keep the whip in the wax for about anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, or until the bubbles stop, which indicates that the whip has absorbed wax, just maximum capacity of wax that's been absorbed inside the whip. Okay, the whip has stopped bubbling here, which means it's fully absorbed. So I'm going to bring, as you can see here, I'm lifting the heel out first. Immediately, I'm just dabbing the whole whip. Make sure you get the whole fall. Work your way back up a little bit. Make sure the knots are nice and clean. There's no puddling of wax on your whip. And then you can just hang your whip up to dry. I'm going to hang mine up here. Let it cool. I'll let the wax cool for about 10 minutes. Okay, the whip has fully cooled out of the wax. Time to make and install a cracker. Now to spin crackers, I'm using, this is just a simple hook. You can use a nail for this. And into the drill. Simple as that. Something to spin the thread. I'm using nylon thread for my crackers. And what I like about this stuff is it's very thin and very strong. And because it's thin, you can gauge how thick your crackers are depending on how many strands you have. So here's 4 strands. Here's 6 strands. And I like to use anywhere between 6 and 8 strands. Of course, we're going to double this up. See that? So I'll take all these, cut it here. And of course you want your unfolded cluster of strands here to be double the length of your cracker. So I'll take the end with all the loops here. And I'll just put all of them through my hook like this. Missed a couple of them. And then we just spin it. We spin it in the drill like this. It's simple taking it off here. I'm going to hold it in the middle like this and make sure that they're even. Pull this off, let it go, and here's our cracker. Tying off the top. Taking a pair of snippers here and trimming the tassels. Make sure that every single strand is exactly even. I'm going to be doing a video soon about crackers and how if you cut it at an angle it'll affect the crack of the whip. There you go. And it's time to install the cracker onto the whip. So there it is. Instead of tying the cracker onto the fall these days, I'm using what's called an awl or a fid to poke a hole straight down through the fall, right in the middle, like this. So once that's poked through, you can work it on there a little bit. And we're just opening up a hole here, big enough so we can fit the whole cracker through it. Oftentimes, as soon as you pull the awl out, the hole will close up. So what I like to do is just melt the edges. I can slide it on even more. I'm going to take my cracker, twist it a little bit with the twist, not against the twist, with it. And we're going to stick this tip of the cracker into the hole we just made, like this. Through that like that. Pull it. So now I'm going to open up an eye in that part of the cracker that we just slipped through here. Like this. I'm going to take the other end and fold it through this hole here. Still hold your finger in the loop. And pull. And it should end up looking like this. See that? and that'll never come off until the cracker wears out, which you'll obviously then want to take it off. Replace it the same way. If the end of your fall gets damaged, simply cut it back, melt it, and repeat this process. That's how I install crackers these days. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. This is my current method for making a nylon bullwhip. Hope you found it informative and helpful. All that's left now is to give it a few test cracks. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.